Hello, ARC family. Welcome to the ARC journey. We have been talking relentlessly about conference the last couple vlogs. So I just want to remind you that the registration is up, and you can get connected through that through the Compass, through our Facebook page or our website. So all of those ways you can get registered. If you have a report, it needs to be into Dean Hay immediately. That's at admin@ar.cggc.org. We also have been talking about discipleship, and I particularly want to look at leadership development as a part of discipleship and talk about that a little bit in the next couple weeks. So, working from the foundation that God has been working in all of us, and has been. And this has been through pandemic to understanding that there's a shift in our culture, that there's a shift happening that needs to be happening, is happening in our churches. And that we as as the leaders need to be shifting also, that God is working in us. So I would take you to Romans 8:28. And it says, and we know that in all things, God is working for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. So I believe that God takes every situation, God uses every situation that happens in our lives, whether it is something that we have been responsible for or something that we're not responsible for, something we can control or something that is uncontrolled by our influence. And God uses those to develop our character and personally grow us into the kind of leaders, disciples that he needs us to be. God can do that in and through every situation, but only to the extent that we as disciples, followers, are willing to allow him to speak into our lives, right? And so throughout this entire pandemic process, coming out of it, on trying to understand or conceptualize the shifts that are happening and what we need to do becomes so apparent. My weaknesses and my strengths, and and my desire is to grow my weaknesses and to work in my strengths, right? And there are two schools of thought that surround this, right? There's a whole self-help industry that has grown up that focuses on our weaknesses, right? We can help you with your weakness. And so books have been committed, dedicated, conferences to going to and focusing on your weakness, living in your weakness, growing your weakness so that you can become a better leader. The the part of the outcome of that is that then we become extremely worn out, tired, beat up because we are working in our weaknesses. We are continuously working to build up our weakness, and there's all kinds of stress that comes from that. The other side is living in our strengths, right? And that is growing, understanding what we do and what we do well, focusing on that, getting other people to surround us who do the other things to complement our leadership. So that's different for each one of us. And the problem with that is that we can become so narrow-minded and focused that we lose sight of the way that God is trying to expand us and grow us, right? That we look at the growth opportunities and we wipe them away because we're not even dealing with that. That's my weakness. I'm not going to do that. So I believe that through this, God has been pointing out to us, to me, to you, our weaknesses and our strengths. And through those, God is working to help grow those weaknesses in our lives and emphasize the strengths, right? So the question and the challenge is this, is how do we help those we are discipling go through this and process this in their walk with Jesus and in over time, right? So God has not brought us to where we are today, just today. We didn't just wake up this morning and wow, this is what I'm good at. There has been a process that God has used to mature you, to mature me, to bring us into the leadership roles that He has called us to, and placed us in the communities that we are serving. Right. So how do we make this an intentional part of our discipleship process? How are we acknowledging this as a part of our own personal journey, our own discipleship journey, and how do we utilize this in helping those who are coming along? I think it's interesting. Um, I think it's interesting at times, through our most painful experiences, it seems like God does His greatest work, right? It is when we are in those pain moments that we realize that God is stretching us, God is growing us. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not while we're going through it, God is doing something. And I think Seth Godin was the one who suggested that if you're not uncomfortable in your work as a leader, and it's almost certainly you're not reaching your potential as a leader. It sounds like a big, bold statement. But if that statement is true, then congratulations, God. I feel like I am there, right? This is the moment. This is the season in my life. This is where we have journeyed to, where it feels like this is uncomfortable because everything I know, everything that we have experienced, all of the tradition, not all, many of the traditions that we've set into place have shifted. Things have changed. What I have been an expert at is no longer necessarily the topmost priority. Other things are rising, and the church is shifting in what it needs. So, there is suggested by Robert Clinton in his book, The Making of a Leader, that there are 6 stages of there's a 6-stage model that he presents that God uses to develop leaders. And if we can understand that, then we can help our disciples. I think you might be able to help your disciples in their process of becoming the disciples that God is calling them to be and seeing that potential lived out as the leaders that God is equipping them to become, right? So this is discussed in Robert Clinton's book, The Making of a Leader. It is discussed in Blackaby's book, Spiritual Leadership. And so I think is important for us to talk about. So what I want to do over the next couple of vlogs is talk about those 6 stages of spiritual development as laid out by Robert Clinton, and look at those and reflect on those in the life of Moses. We could look at them in the life of Abraham. I could look at them personally in my own life and be able to share it with you. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it through Moses. So that's what we're going to do probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Probably 2. But the 6 phases or stages are this. Phase 1 is sovereign foundations. Phase 2 is inner life growth. Phase 3 is ministry maturing. Phase 4 is life maturing. Phase 5 is convergence. And phase 6 is afterglow or celebration. These are not my idea. It's not new with me. This is Robert Clinton The Making of a Leader, and echoed again in Spiritual Leadership by Blackaby. And I think in our quest and our understanding that our leadership pools are becoming shallow. Oh, and we are being called to develop disciples, and we are being called to deploy leaders. This is going to be important for us to process in what we are going through, and for us to understand and implement in our discipleship ministry. So that's what I wanted to share with you. That's what I'm hoping to share over the next 2 weeks. God bless. Keep up the great work. It's exciting to be visiting churches and seeing them full. Um, it just really is. And we have been experiencing that in many of our churches. So God bless. Keep it up. And keep making disciples and keep shining. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.